Good day, everyone. I am Dr. Michael Ian Santamaria. I am a faculty of the Department of Community and Family Medicine, and I am here to give you a lecture on evidence-based medicine. Here are my learning objectives. First, you need to know how to define evidence-based medicine. Next is apply the fundamental principles of evidence-based medicine and know the skills in evidence-based medicine. Before I start my lecture, I want to impart to you the words of Dr. Dave Sackett, the father of evidence-based medicine. He said, "Half of what you learn in medical school will be known to be either dead wrong or out of date within 5 years of graduation. The trouble is that nobody can tell you which half. So the important thing to learn is how to learn on your own." This part of the lecture, we are going to define evidence-based medicine. This definition of evidence-based medicine is from the book Painless Evidence-Based Medicine by Dance et al. According to them, evidence-based medicine is defined as the systematic approach to the acquisition, appraisal, and application of research evidence to guide decisions in healthcare. Let us now dissect the definition of evidence-based medicine. The first is EBM is a systematic approach. This just means that EBM allows practitioners to assess new as well as old technology in an efficient and logical manner without being intimidated or overwhelmed. This approach requires three sets of skill. The first skill is acquisition, the skill to conduct an efficient literature search and secure a publication in response to the information needs. Appraisal, the skill to criticize medical literature and decide if results are credible or not. And application, the skill to utilize the information in the care of specific person or population. EBM guides decision. The evidence itself is only one component of the decisions that need to be made by healthcare providers and patients. Other components are physicians' expertise and patients' values and preferences. Healthcare. The skills in EBM have found application in medicine, surgery, physical therapy, nursing, dentistry, primary care, emergency medicine, and many other fields, including public health. After defining evidence-based medicine, let us go now and discuss the fundamental principles of evidence-based medicine. The two fundamental principles of evidence-based medicine is EBM posits hierarchy of evidence and evidence-based clinical decision-making. Let us now discuss the first fundamental principle of evidence-based medicine, which is EBM posits a hierarchy of evidence. You should always remember that no evidence ranking system or decision tool can be used without a healthy dose of judgment and thought. This just means that the hierarchy of evidence will just be a guide to the most likely best evidence to answer a clinical question, but the article still needs to be evaluated before it is used. The succeeding discussion of the hierarchy of evidence is based on the Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, which states that the evidence pyramid is a hierarchy of the likely best evidence, designed so that it can be used as a shortcut for a busy clinician, researchers, or patients to find the likely best evidence. The first pyramid is to answer how common is the problem. Here, we are asking the prevalence of the disease. On top of the pyramid are local and current random surveys. Next are systematic reviews that allows matching to the local circumstances. Next are local non-random samples. And lastly are case series. The next pyramid is to answer question, is the diagnostic or monitoring test accurate? Here, we are talking about articles on diagnosis. On top of the pyramid are systematic review of cross-sectional studies. Down below are individual cross-sectional studies. Next are non-consecutive studies. Next are case control studies. And lastly are mechanism-based reasoning. The third pyramid answered the question, what will happen if we do not add any therapy? Here, we talk about articles on prognosis. On top of the pyramid are systematic reviews of inception cohort studies. Down below are inception cohort studies. Next are cohort studies or control arm of randomized trials. And lastly are case series and or case control studies. The next pyramid answers the question, does the intervention help? We talk about articles and therapy. On top of the pyramid are systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials or N of 1 trials. Next are randomized trials or an observational study with dramatic effect. Down below are non-randomized controlled cohorts. Next are case series or case control studies. And lastly are mechanism-based reasoning. The next pyramid answers the question, what are the common harms? Here we talk about treatment harms. On top of the pyramid are systematic review of randomized trials. Down below are individually randomized trial. The third are non-randomized controlled cohort or follow-up studies. Next are case series and case control studies. And lastly, mechanism-based reasoning. The next pyramid is answering the question, is this test worthwhile? So we talk about here early detection or screening. So on top of this, the pyramid are systematic review of randomized controlled trials. Next are randomized controlled trials. Next are non-randomized controlled cohort follow-up studies. Next are case series or case control studies. And lastly are mechanism-based reasoning. Haynes et al. Proposed this hierarchy of information services that starts with the collection of original studies, followed by several types of pre-appraised information that starts with the collection of original studies, followed by several types of pre-appraised information. From bottom up include systematic reviews, synopses, summaries, and systems. Single studies represents unique researches conducted to answer specific clinical question. Synthesis. A synthesis is a comprehensive summary of all the evidence surrounding a specific research question, commonly referred to as systematic reviews. Synopses are brief evidence-based bottom line of focused primary PEO. Summaries are regularly updated clinical guidelines or textbooks that integrate evidence-based information about specific clinical problems. Systems integrates information from the lower levels of hierarchy with individual patients' records. Systems represents the ideal source of evidence for clinical decision-making. From the definition of evidence-based medicine, EBM is based on shared decision-making, and to arrive at this decision, we need to incorporate three factors. The first is best research evidence. This is the clinically relevant research, sometimes from the basic science of medicine, but especially from patient-centered clinical research into the accuracy of and precision of diagnostic tests, the power of prognostic markers, and the efficacy and safety of therapeutic, rehabilitative, and preventive strategies. The second is clinical expertise. This is the ability to use our clinical skills and experience to rapidly identify each patient's unique health state and diagnosis, his or her risk and benefit of potential interventions, exposure, diagnostic tests, and his or her values and expectations. And lastly, patients' values and preferences. The unique preferences, concerns, and expectations that each patient brings to a clinical encounter and that must be integrated into a shared clinical decision if they are to serve the patient. After we have defined evidence-based medicine and learned about the fundamental principles of evidence-based medicine, let us now discuss the different skills in evidence-based medicine. There are three skills that you need to learn in evidence-based medicine. First, you need to know how to acquire the evidence. In acquiring the evidence, you need to perform three steps. First is you need to ask a focused clinical question. Next is you need to conduct a search. The third is you need to retrieve the information. After doing these three steps, you are now going to appraise the evidence. In appraising the evidence, you need to appraise for directness, you need to appraise for validity, you need to appraise for results. Then afterwards, after you have appraised the results, you are now going to apply this evidence to your individual patient. In applying the evidence, you need to assess for applicability. Here, you are going to look into the biologic and socioeconomic factors that might affect applicability. Afterwards, you need to individualize the result. After you have individualized the result, you need to discuss this to your patient to come up with a shared decision. Let's now start discussing acquiring the evidence, which is the first step or the first skill that you need to develop in evidence-based medicine. The first step in acquiring the evidence is you need to ask a focused clinical question. So you need to ask, what's the clinical problem? And there are 4 basic questions asked in clinical practice. First is you ask for effectiveness of the treatment. Here we are going to look for articles on therapy. Next is the accuracy of a diagnostic test. You look for articles on diagnosis. The third is harmful effects of a certain exposure. You're going to look for articles on harm. Third, you are going to ask for prognosis of a certain condition. You are going to look for articles on prognosis. Clinical question needs to be framed in a manner that is answerable by the available studies and searchable in the literature database. 3 components are required. The first component is RP, which is the population of interest, usually characterized by a disease or a condition. Next is E, the intervention or exposure in question, either a treatment, a test, a harmful exposure, or a prognostic factor. The last component is O, the outcome expected. This can be disease, complication, or some measures of health. Let's now discuss how to frame a focused clinical question. Here, we have a clinical case scenario. A 45-year-old female was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes mellitus. She has a fasting blood sugar levels of 200 mg per deciliter and a glycosylated hemoglobin of 80%. The primary care physician of the patient wants to discuss with the patient the treatment options for her, including initiating baseline insulin. The previous slide shows you a clinical case scenario that asks a question on therapy. In writing a therapy question, you can write it this way. Among P, these are patients with a certain condition. How effective is E, a certain treatment, in preventing O, an adverse outcome? Here is the sample question for our clinical case scenario. Among patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus, how effective is basal insulin in preventing hyperglycemia? Here, the population are patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus. The exposure is the basal insulin, and the outcome of interest is preventing hyperglycemia. Let us now look into the second clinical case scenario. A 30-year-old male having flu-like symptoms after being exposed to a confirmed COVID-19 patient called the Barangay Health Emergency Response Team. The BERT did a rapid antigen test to the patient, considering that there was a shortage of COVID-19 RT-PCR. The patient consulted with you through telemedicine with a negative result. You wanted to discuss to your patient what does this mean. The clinical case scenario a while ago asked question on diagnosis. So how are you going to write a question on diagnosis? So you can write it this way. Among patients with P, patient with a certain condition, how accurate is E, a certain test, in diagnosing O, a certain disease? This is the sample question that was I able to formulate based on the clinical case scenario. So among COVID-19 suspects, how accurate is COVID-19 rapid antigen test in diagnosing SARS-CoV-2 infection? So here, we have our population, which are patients with who are suspected with COVID-19. Next is the exposure, which is the COVID-19 rapid antigen test, and the outcome, SARS-CoV-2 infection. Here is a third clinical case scenario. So we have here a 30-year-old male has a 10-pack year of history of smoking. You ask him if he plans to quit smoking, and his response was no. You wanted to initiate a brief smoking cessation counseling, emphasizing on the harmful effects of smoking to the body and especially in developing lung cancer. The clinical case scenario a while ago asked a question on harm. So how are you going to write a question on harm? So you can write it among patients with P, patient with a certain condition, by how much does E, a potentially harmful exposure, increases the risk of O, an adverse outcome. This is the clinical case scenario or the focus clinical question that I was able to formulate based on the clinical case scenario. So among healthy males, by how much does smoking increases the risk of lung cancer? Here, the population of interest are healthy males. The exposure is smoking, and the outcome is actually lung cancer. Okay, this is the last clinical scenario. So, a 50-year-old female was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. The oncologist initiated a family meeting to discuss the treatment options to the patient. During the meeting, the patient asked, "What are the chances of me dying from this disease before starting any treatment?" The clinical case scenario from the previous slide asks a question on prognosis. So how are you going to write a prognosis question? So among P, patients with a certain condition, who have E, a certain prognostic factor, what is the probability of O, an adverse outcome? So this is the clinical case scenario from the clinical case scenario a while ago. This is the focus clinical question that I was able to write. Among patients with breast cancer stage 3, what is the probability of death in the next 5 years? So here, the population of interest are patients with breast cancer. The exposure is actually the staging of the breast cancer, which is stage 3. So the outcome of interest is death in the next 5 years. Let's discuss now the second step in acquiring the evidence, which is searching the medical literature. So the question in mind will be, what are the latest articles? The advantage of phrasing the clinical question in terms of population, exposure, and outcome is that these variables are your gateways to medical literature databases. The databases like Medline usually classifies article according to P, E, and O. Let us now discuss the second step in acquiring the evidence, which is searching the medical literature. So you need to ask, what are the latest articles? There are two modes in literature search. The first one is the pull technology. This refers to the information services where the user seeks the information. This is previously known as active search. This is usually done through search engine like PubMed. The second is the push technology, where pre-appraised information seeks the user, usually through electronic prompts on the computer or a handheld device. A good example of this technology is the McMaster Plus Evidence Alert. So this is the last step of acquiring the evidence, which is retrieving the medical literature. So how do I get a copy? So these are the ways we can retrieve the article. First is access it for free. You can easily download it easily if it is for free. Just click on the button and then it will automatically show you the free article. But then sometimes some articles are not for free. So, what can we do, no? Para makuha natin yung article for free, no? First, you can actually seek for help, no, from multinational companies that have access to extensive library collections. So when you become doctors, no, there are medical representatives, no, from different multinational companies, no, that will be covering for you. And some of these medical representative will ask you, no, if you need an article, no, that you need to retrieve, no. So they are very willing to help, no, to get those article for you. Next is you need to write the author of the article, no, and request for a copy, no. Um, Yun nga, no, if the article is not for free, no, some medical databases, no, have the contact numbers or contact information, no, of the different authors, no, so that you can request, no, for a copy of the article. Next is you need to keep a list of friends in high-income countries, especially those with access to university libraries. So here, no, actually, no, you are a student, no, or FUNRMF medical center, no, or Institute of Medicine, no. So we have the library, no. I hope you have access to remote access, no. So we have their different databases where you can seek for articles, no. You can use them, no, to seek for articles, and then afterwards, no, most of the articles, no, are there, no, are for free, no. If the article is not for free, no, you can always message our librarian, no, to help you retrieve that article. So if all else fails, no, so hindi ka nabigyan ng multinational company, no, ng free article mo, no, you were not able to write the author, no, to request for a copy, no, or you have no friends in high income countries that has access to university library. Maybe if the article is really important for you, to you, no, you can always buy the article. So after retrieving the article, no, let's now discuss, no, the third skill in evidence-based medicine, which is appraising for the evidence. So the first step in appraising the evidence is appraising for directness. So the question in mind will be, will I read this article? Direct evidence comes from research that directly compares the intervention in which we are interested, when applied to the populations in which we are interested, and measures outcomes important to patients. Here, in this module, no, we are going to define directness as it pertains to how well the PEO of the article corresponds to the PEO of our clinical question. The second step in appraising evidence is appraising validity, no? So what do you need to keep in mind, no? So will I believe this article? Validity refers to how closely you think study results resembles the truth. In appraising validity, it is trying to assess if there are biases committed during the conduct of the study. And we all know biases can actually overestimate or underestimate the results of our study, no? So there are different validity guides that are being used, no, depending on the type of question that you are going to ask, no. In therapy question, there are actually 8 validity questions that you need to answer. In articles on diagnosis, no, we have 4 validity guides, no, that we need to answer, no. And actually, no, there are different tools, no, that you can use, no, when you're going to appraise for validity. The third and last step in appraising the evidence is actually appraising results. So what do you need to ask yourself? No, does the intervention works? No? So the term results refer to the numeric expression of effectiveness when we talk about articles on therapy, accuracy when we talk about articles on diagnosis, causal relationship when we ask for articles on harm, and prognosis when we talk about articles on prognosis. Now let's talk about the third and last step or skill in evidence-based medicine, no, which is applying the evidence. So the first step in applying the evidence is actually assessing for applicability. So what you need to ask, no, can I use this intervention to my patient? So you need to take a closer look at the biologic and socioeconomic differences between the study population and the patient seen by the clinician. So when we talk about biologic factors, no, we talk about sex, comorbidities of our patient, um, race of our patient, the age of our patient, and also the pathology, no, of our patient. And then we look into the socioeconomic factors, no, that actually can affect, no, the applicability of the article, no, to our individual patient. So the second step in applying the evidence is individualizing the results. So how will it affect my patient? Studies reports the average effect of health technology on large group of people. Healthcare providers, on the other hand, deals with individual patients whose response may not be average. Individualization of results refer to estimating the effect of the health technology on the given patient. So after individualizing the result, no, you need to communicate, no, this to your patient. No? So you should be able to discuss the risk and benefit of the intervention, and also the cost is very important, no, so that your patient will be able to decide, no, if he or she, no, will agree to your proposed intervention, no, based on his or her values and preferences. Okay, so after discussing this, no, you will be able to have, no, or come up with a shared decision. So how are you going to share the decision? So sharing decisions with the patient is laying down to the patient the different risks, benefit, and costs of the health technology, helping them understand. This entails some physician expertise in communication skills. This is why, no, you're being taught, no, during your first year, second year, no, active listening skill, no, so that you will be able to discuss, no, the different treatment options to your patient, no. In giving that those treatment options, no, you should be able to discuss to them the different risks, no, the benefits, and also the cost, no, of your intervention or your proposed intervention to the patient, no, and letting them decide, no, if they want to undergo the treatment or they want to undergo the test, no, uh, based on what you have discussed to your patient, no? So considering, no, the different values and preferences of our patients. So before I end this lecture, I want to leave with you, these words of Alvin Toffler, who is regarded as one of the world's outstanding futurists. He said that the literate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn and unlearn and relearn.